Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 226th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss social injustice, or social justice, kind of like social injustice. Hard to discuss one without the other. Today's panel begins with Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Then Tom Finley, retired vice president of human resources at Rubbermaid Incorporated. And Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and the faculty of Wadsworth Senior High School. And Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Ron, the issue of social justice has become a hot topic in our country, and it's probably going to be for a long time. Do you see any way out of this?
Short answer is probably no. I started with a dictionary definition here. Social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. Social workers aim to open the doors of access and opportunity for everyone, particularly those in greatest need. In the United States, we haven't had a very good record of that, looking at Native Americans and Blacks and Asians and the Irish over the years, treating people with equal opportunity. So there's probably a few reasons why that is. This seemed to be, it's kind of the secular expression of the golden rule, which pretty much every major religion going back at least to Buddha has as treating your neighbor as you would yourself be treated. So a chemist such as myself feels that if he knows the properties of atoms and molecules, he can predict how those are going to work together and develop new and useful materials. However, if you want to look at how an individual atom or molecule will behave, that's not as easy. There are variations in that. You can't really tell what a particular one is going to do. So there are statistical methods of looking at that. For the energy situation of statistical thermodynamics, for something called statistical mechanics, when looking particularly at a subatomic world. But so look at the groups, populations in general, you can make useful predictions and get useful knowledge about them. Not about individual particles, however. Sociology is considered, in contrast to chemistry, is considered a soft science or inexact science. That's not meant to be pejorative. It's just a kind of a way of characterizing it. But again, sociology can look at characteristics of groups and populations, but to see what an individual is going to do is a little more difficult. We all have tribes we belong to. There are big tribes called governments and political parties. There are tribes which are civic groups such as Kiwanis and Rotarians and the Knights of Columbus. There are sports groups, sports fans or form a tribe. Religious groups form a tribe, the Methodists, the Roman Catholics, the Lutherans, and so on. And each of these groups has sort of rules of conduct that apply to them. They have a social contract with each other. Now, these rules may not be particularly articulated, but they're sort of tacitly accepted that this is what they're going to be. However, again, an individual in one of those groups may be completely diversified. For example, a lifelong conservative Republican may be so disgusted with the mendacious narcissism of their party's leader that they go ahead and vote Democrat. So that could happen. but they've all followed the social contract. And when a group does something in counter to that, then the group, or if society or another group is counter to them, that group can feel threatened because their tribe is being threatened. And therefore, they have their own set of ideas of what social justice is. And if their social contract is being threatened, then that's looked upon as they're not getting social justice. And similarly, they become a little reluctant to give social justice to another group, which they think may threaten them or may may threaten them. So we have this contrast between self-interest and interest in the greater good. And in at least our present situation, in politically particularly, with the wide dichotomy of views that we have, and the really sharp distinctions we have, with a smaller group in the middle, a smaller group being conservative and trying to get both sides to agree and get things done, whereas the opposing radical and liberal groups on each side of these parties are vying against each other, and it's just very difficult. And I think that it's a human situation not to apply the golden rule except to people in your own group, and I think that that's probably part of the root of some of this. It's a philosophical, it's a religious, it's a sociological phenomenon. And I don't see a whole lot of ways out of this. Here in this group, we're trying to practice civility and demonstrate civility. That's part of it. Tolerance for the other points of view, that's part of it. And everything we can do to foster that, I think, will be good, will help promote the concept of social justice. And I think it's a very worthwhile goal. It's something we need to work for. I think it's a very difficult process. So,
I remember when Barry Goldwater was running against Lyndon Johnson in 1964.
somewhere around there.
64, and that Lyndon Johnson had given his reason for a certain position that he was taking by saying, "Well, a guy's got to get elected." And Barry Goldwater said, "No, a guy doesn't got to get elected." And I think that the ideas and the definitions of social justice hinge a great deal on somebody's opinion of getting elected. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, John, I'll kind of just build on that. I didn't intend to, but it leads right into it. Let me first suggest that this is an undefinable term. It kind of is one of those terms that says it means what I say it will mean. And you move on from there. But clearly, it's value-based. That is, the speaker, the person expressing self or herself, values emerge. So that makes it personal and organizational, value-based. So that in itself says, that almost makes it undefinable as a term that can be universally agreed upon. That this is what values that I have, therefore they're your values, and makes that assumption and goes on. So it's an elusive term, social justice.
And we can
that in itself will cause arguments, confusion, etc.
Yeah. Well, Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, as Tom just said, I think social justice is a little difficult to define. And, Ron gave us the definition from the dictionary. True social justice would be if everyone everywhere had the same opportunities, the same abilities, the same status in life, the same amount of money. And of course, that's not going to be the case. I don't think we can take it that far. But there is a lot to be said for social justice and treating people equally and giving everyone at least a fair opportunity to succeed. The present party, or the Republican Party, in many cases are pushing now that the idea of fairness, equity, equality, diversity, that these are really bad terms and we should be ignoring them and not even be saying them. They shouldn't be part of our education system or our college system. But please remember that these are the words and the reason that we have Social Security, the reasons that we have Medicare, the reason we have Medicaid, the reason we have the Affordable Care Act, the reason we have the Americans with Disabilities Acts. These were all prime examples of social justice addressing a problem. And I think for the betterment of the country and the betterment of people, to give them a fair shot, to give them that safety net so that they don't go into poverty. Now, there are challenges to that going on right now. I think the Supreme Court has a case pending right now against enrollment qualifications or criterion at, I believe it's Harvard and the University of, it's North Carolina or South Carolina. I can't remember.
Carolina, I believe.
North Carolina?
I believe so.
Yeah. And I always forget which one it is. And basically what it is, it's the lawsuit by members of the Asian community that say in those schools' efforts to diversify and to include people of color and minorities in their student base, they have discriminated against the Asian population and limited their memberships in the colleges. It will be very interesting, I think, to see how this comes out of the Supreme Court. And it should be, I think, within the next week or so, if I'm not mistaken, that they will have a decision on this. So there are problems that develop when we do try to enact social justice, that by helping one group, we harm another group. And that can be concerning. But to say that diversity and equity and all of these things are bad is also wrong, because it is this need to help others that I think has brought about so many great changes within this country. Ron made the comment about dealing with your own tribe, and fairness is great as long as it's with your own tribe. And I think we see that right now in this country, in that there are those that do not feel that we should help the needy in other parts of the world, that we should only help those that are in this country first. And then if we've got some time and money left over, we'll help others. So for this reason, for example, we should not be helping the country of Ukraine fight their war against Russia. And the idea is, hey, that's not us. Let's deal with us first. And we'll overlook this absolute social injustice that is occurring in that country because we have problems here. That's the tribal aspect that Ron is referring to, I think, and a good example, I think, of that. So,
so being social justice is pretty much the same thing as being woke in today's definition.
Yes.
Yeah. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we've basically shed some light on why it's so hard to have social justice. Because in the effort to make everything equal or to have some sort of an equality, some group is going to have to pay. Some group is going to be disadvantaged. In the instance of Harvard, trying to have a diverse student population. And so they limit the Asian population in that instance. When I just go back to what I feel is sort of a core principle for me is I want the best possible person. And when we start throwing in testing and diversity quotas and preference quotas, I really don't think it helps anybody. It doesn't lift anybody out of the situation that they find themselves in. I was listening, and if you haven't listened to any podcasts lately, I would suggest you listen to the Joe Rogan interview of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And this guy, poor guy's been dragged by both sides. The Democrats do not want anything to do with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Okay. They bring up his vaccinations, the vaccine thing that he's done before. They bring up, the guy, I mean, if you listen to him, he has some pretty good ideas, and he's swimming upstream. This whole diversity thing he debunks. He says we just cannot live with that. We cannot have. How can you keep up with all the social injustice out there? One week it's the war in Ukraine. The next week it's Black Lives Matter. The next week it's Pride. The next week it's LGBTQ plus LTB, whatever it is. Then we're getting whipsawed around, and what that happens is the tribes basically harden their position. No, there's no more middle ground anymore. I think the five of us here represent probably the last standing group of people that are willing to talk about things, because it's just not happening out there in the real world, And I, probably someone would say, would I ever listen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for 3 hours on a podcast? That guy had some pretty interesting things to say. And he talked very little about his position on vaccines and some of the issues that have come up with it. I mean, I would think that he would be, he is a potential candidate. He has some very, very good ideas. He's got that Kennedy-esque mentality when it comes to fairness and helping people, giving people that hand up. You can't even say that anymore. You can't even say helping people up, because that's discriminatory. I mean, you can't even say, oh, they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, because some social justice warrior will pillage you online, because you just can't say that. I'm finding it hard to keep up with just what the latest thing is I have to put on my Facebook banner. He brought up that we have committed over $112 billion to the Ukrainian war. We're fighting a proxy war. And he said the total budget for NIH is $12 billion a year. He said there's something wrong there, and he says the total budget for the Department of Education is like $10 billion. He said, so we just can't seem to get past this whole issue that, there are certain things we just cannot look back in history and correct in today's thing. And now I'm not for, keeping people down and the man and all that kind of stuff, but it's just, I find it really hard to keep up with what I'm supposed to really care about today. And I think as a community, we do pretty well, but I don't know what flag to fly. I don't know, what I should put on my Facebook, what I can and can't say. It's political correctness run amok, and it's got to stop somewhere. And I think it's beginning to stop in areas that people never thought it would. The people that are sort of centrist left are beginning to say, we can't deal with this anymore.
Can you give an example of that?
What's that?
Can you give an example of that?
Well, sure. For instance, some of the podcasts that I've been listening to, Barry Weiss, who has on a variety of people, mostly liberals. She interviewed Peter Thiel. I don't know if you know Peter Thiel or not. He was part of they call him the PayPal mafia. They started PayPal. Elon Musk took his billions and put it into SpaceX. Peter Thiel invested in Facebook and a variety of things. These people that have been sort of, I would say, center left are saying we just, it's going to be the death of us if we just continue pushing, this notion that somehow there's got to be social justice and parity. I don't know if there ever will be, and maybe that's sort of myopic, but I just don't know what it gets us at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, we've got Tim Scott coming onto the scene now, and preaching to Black people. Take opportunity, not oppression.
Yeah.
And I don't know who it was that quoted this, but if you want equal opportunity, apply equal effort. Graduate from high school, get a job, don't have children until you get married. There are certain behavioral things that people just have to do if they want to be a successful person in a modern culture.
And Barry Weiss did interview him for an hour and a half. I can't imagine you wouldn't agree with some of the things he says. But what happens is that whoever decides, whoever that person is or that group is that decides that you're not woke enough, you get canceled and you get sort of excommunicated from their little church, you know. And believe me, it's become a religion with these people. It's no longer just some social movement. It is a religion, and they treat it as a religion. And when people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. start talking, they just, I mean, their heads explode. They have excommunicated. That guy is, I mean, he is not, his name is not to be spoken.
How does all this play out over the long haul?
I would like to insert this in the thinking here, and it's so many things, and so often I'm amazed at the founders of the Constitution creating the language that promotes such things as social justice, but of course gives us no idea how we should get there, but that we should get there. And this is one of those situations where, or these examples of what we live with and have to define ourselves. We don't always start out that way with a good definition or an understandable one. So this is no exception. It is driven by values, and it suggests that those values be openly expressed in conversations and creation of laws, etc.
But it will be quick to point out, somebody would be quick to point out that those same founders accepted and supported slavery.
But see, Tom, herein lies the problem. You can't talk about it if it doesn't fit the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with where this is heading, is that this type of conversation that we're having, I don't know if you could have it on a college campus without, you know, setting some kids' hair on fire, because they don't want to hear that. You can't argue a point. You know, at the end of the day, I might not agree with Ron, I might not agree with Patty, I might not agree with you, but I don't hate you. I don't avoid you. I mean, I like you guys, or I wouldn't show up here.
You know, John, you brought up Tim Scott. You know, unfortunately, Tim Scott is not resonating with the Republican voters.
No.
And other than Trump, the only other one that is DeSantis. And DeSantis is the polar opposite of the woke population of the Democratic Party that Bryan was referring to, for the Republican Party. I mean, he wants to and has banned the use of anything that resembles equality or diversity or social programs. This is not in his wheelhouse. And unfortunately, that is resonating with a great number of people in this country. And it's the reason, because we have that far woke on the left, and we have this far how would I phrase this?
Crazy right.
Non-inclusive members of the Republican Party
Biden,
that are in control right now. And
MAGA radicals. That's Biden's term.
The alt-right.
Well, I wouldn't even call them they might be MAGA, but I wouldn't say that they are the only ones that are supporting those issues. So,
when I think about the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, I think there's no such thing as a Democrat Party or a Republican Party. There are multiple parties within each one. And that we have to quit just calling each other names all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And listen to each other. That's the biggest thing. Nobody tends to listen anymore. was it Judge Judy says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So that you would listen as opposed to talk.
Listen to Judge Judy. Yeah.
Of course.
Well, I look at the candidates on the Republican side, and it's awfully difficult for me to accept the fact that they're serious. You open up a campaign and you accept donations. You give yourself a tremendous amount of publicity for what? You're not going to be I mean, what are there, 13 people? National
name recognition and a possible position on the cabinet, I think is what some of that is.
Or a contract with a network.
That's true too. Yeah.
Just wonder how many of them Fox will want to hire after.
Of course, Christie just gave up his contract with ABC to run for president. So
who did?
Chris Christie.
Oh, he had a contract with ABC.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that turncoat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but see, the point is we talk about the Republicans on the right. I get it. But you look at the left. Why is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a pariah when it comes to the Democratic Party? He has more liberal in him than anybody. He's fought for the environment. He's known as an environmentalist. He's got all this stuff. But because he doesn't share the notion that somehow pharma, we could have a discussion on pharma, and what he feels is that the government has lost their ability to actually manage a relationship, that they're captured. You know, the NIH and the FDA are captured by pharma. And he says that's really where the Democratic Party gets most of their money, and trial lawyers.
Well, we will have to discuss that sometime, but not today. Thank you very much, folks. I think that was a good program.
Bet.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.